Okay, welcome to this webinar hosted by Pomerol Partners. It's great to have so much interest in this webinar. The topic of data quality is certainly a hot topic at the moment, and NodeGraph is at the forefront of addressing this need. So, especially when it comes to data quality, specifically rated to click environments. My name's Scott. I'm a senior consultant at Pomerol Partners. I've been with the firm for nearly 4 years. I spent a few years with the firm in London before relocating to Denver, Colorado. But I'm originally from New Zealand, which you might pick up by my thick accent, I've been told. I'm a Click developer first and foremost, moving from ClickView through to ClickSense over the past few years. I do a fair bit of project management and also support the sales process from a technical perspective for Pomerol. Just a little bit about Pomerol Partners to set the scene. We are a BI consultancy and Click partner established in 2013. As a company, we were born out of the investment banking industry, but we've since broadened our reach and now have clients in many sectors, pharmaceuticals, retail, supply chain, manufacturing, just to name a few. In response to building up a strong presence in EMEA and our London office, and an ever sort of increasing demand for our services on the US side, we opened an office in Chicago about 2 years ago. So we now have a team of about 50 between the UK and the US. And that team is incredibly diverse. We have some solid Click luminaries who have been deep in ClickView and ClickSense for many years. A lot of seasoned experts in ERP and CRM systems, especially around SAP and Salesforce. We have a great internship program, and we also now have a dedicated software development team. So our European base is in London. We have a base in South Africa in Cape Town. Our US sort of main base and main office is in Chicago, but we also have a presence in Kansas City and Denver. And while covering projects across the US, our core focus is really on the Midwest and Rockies territories. We work with a wide range of clients and a wide range of implementation and support types. We do a lot of platform development. We build autonomous solutions. We do a lot of enablement and training, a lot of hosted environments and some staff augmentation too. But now more than ever, we're really helping companies establish self-service BI environments. And it's the introduction of tools like NodeGraph that are really helping companies sort of manage and scale these self-service BI environments. So as a partner of NodeGraph, we're running this webinar today purely as a response to demand, as we see more and more clients looking for ways to sort of de-risk their Click environments and firm up the foundations and build a stronger platform so that they can scale up and really enhance the self-service aspect of their environments. So in terms of an agenda for this webinar today, we're going to try and keep things pretty brief, pretty tight. The first thing we want to look at is just what is NodeGraph? Where's the value? Where's the ROI? We're going to take a look at how NodeGraph works, the key functionality and the three sort of key base modules. Then we also want to look at sort of the use cases and the value from a developer standpoint, from an analyst, sort of business analyst and report builder standpoint, and then also how NodeGraph can benefit those in IT. And then we'll just take a quick look at pricing and implementation. So what we typically see from our experience in Click implementations and the Click implementation lifecycle is the following. Like, we'll often see demand from one or more business units to sort of enhance their reporting capabilities. So the project may be led by the business side or IT, but it'll typically start off a little rogue, with the core focus on creating some value really quickly, solving some immediate problems, and creating some ROI to justify the initial expenditure, that it took to get the Click environment up and running. And then once Click apps are in production, you typically see the appetite increase as more and more people are exposed to the reporting across the business, and they start to identify their own use cases and other opportunities. So this often leads to more users in the environment, an expansion of the development users, as well as the sort of business analyst report consumer type of users. And there's a general demand for more data sources. So as the number of reports and the criticality of those reports increases, we start to see two really common problems. The first is around data quality. So how can you be confident that the data you're feeding back to the business is correct? What processes can you set up to monitor this without creating an administrative burden that takes a whole lot of time and resource? And then in terms of feeding data to the business, how do you establish trust, understanding and governance so that the business can rely on the data that they're being fed and not having to pour resource into constantly sort of validating and checking and ensuring that that information they're getting is correct. And then the second key problem we see is around visibility of the data lineage. So this is around people being able to understand and explain exactly where their data comes from. So a business analyst needs a really good grasp of the data lineage to be effective in a self-service BI environment. They need to understand where their information is coming from so that they can answer questions when challenged without having to go back to the dev team or go back to IT. And so, how can you communicate data lineage to end users? How do you assess the impact of changes on the wider environment? So when a developer wants to make a change to an ETL process or a data source or a field in a report somewhere, how do they assess what the impact of that change is on the wider environment? How do they remove the risk from making that change? The load script editor in a Qlik environment often becomes a black box, and the ETL workflow is hidden in a whole lot of load script and a whole lot of scheduled tasks, essentially. And it's often those tasks that paint the picture of the actual ETL workflow and the different layers in that ETL process. The other piece is how to keep documentation up to date, and that's for both IT and the business users. So before we jump in and take a look at how NodeGraph can address some of these issues, I just want to dive in a little bit more into this idea of data quality. So there's a few statistics at the top of the screen there. 25% of US companies data is believed to be inaccurate. 84% of CEOs worry about their data quality. So data quality is a big issue, and it's definitely something that becomes more of an issue and harder to manage as the BI environment expands and there's more hands involved. So the benefits of achieving and maintaining data quality are obviously, increased efficiency and cost savings, and then that having proven data quality enables more informed decisions and reduces risk. So it's pretty straightforward on that front. And then the benefits of creating visibility of your data lineage. There's benefits here for business users, developers, and IT, in fact. So from the business user side, it means the business user can investigate a field or a calculation, and they can answer a question on where a piece of data has come from without having to query IT for help. So this is really crucial for a self-service environment. And then on the developer standpoint, developers can quickly view the dependencies between data sources and reports in that full end-to-end ETL process if they have visibility of the lineage. So they can significantly reduce the risk that's posed by making changes to that sort of under the bonnet ETL process. Another benefit here on the developer side is the ability to identify sort of redundant processes that are being run and not necessarily creating any value. And then also knowledge transfer within that development team becomes a lot easier when there's a good tool to offer some visibility of data lineage. So what is NodeGraph? NodeGraph is a data quality platform. It's for QlikView and for QlikSense solutions, and it allows you to explore, visualize, and trace where your data comes from, whether it's up to date, how it's calculated. NodeGraph visualizes the Qlik solution. So the main piece of NodeGraph that I often focus on is the dependency explorer, and this is the piece that's essentially visualizing what's held in your script. So it's visualizing all of the layers of taking data from source, saving these into QVDs, doing some transformation processes on those QVDs, and then finally using those QVDs to, or the transformed QVDs to build data models and then to load applications on top of that. So it's a visual solution that paints a picture of what's happening from end to end. NodeGraph enables you to scale your BI environment without any major additional resource. So there's a lot of work that NodeGraph will do that otherwise would have to be done manually in order to scale up your environment. So that's another key piece of value from NodeGraph. So just reiterating a few of these points, developers save time with an instant way to see how a single field is being transformed. We can remove a lot of the data quality risk and cost from your BI environment. NodeGraph automatically creates full system documentation at the click of a button, and it's always 100% up to date because it's live and it's looking at your whole Click ecosystem. So there's a huge piece of value here in having perfectly up-to-date documentation that's live and requires no effort to create. NodeGraph is a read-only product. It's very simple. It's a piece of software that's installed on your Click server alongside ClickView or ClickSense. It's an out-of-the-box solution, and I know a lot of people say that, but this is a genuine solution that really is pretty out of the box with minimal configuration. You just need to point NodeGraph to where you store your Click log files, and also point NodeGraph to your log files and to your sort of QVD repositories or to your data sources. That one installation of NodeGraph can be used by IT or by the development team or by business users. So they can all actually use the same platform and take from it what they need. So let's dive into NodeGraph and actually take a look at the tool itself. So what we're looking at here is we have 3 key modules. Let me just show you these modules. We've got the Dependency Explorer, the Field Explorer, and a Governance module here. There's actually 2 additional modules, which is a Test module and a GDPR module. But I'm mainly going to focus on these 3 modules here today. So if we jump into the Dependency Explorer, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at a very simple Click ecosystem, but something that's also quite typical. So we have our data sources over on the left. The second layer here is sort of extract processes from those data sources. We have another layer here that's doing some transformation and saving down QVDs, transform QVDs. And then we have a published layer here of applications. And then the last layer here, we can actually see the content that exists within each of these applications. So as an example, I can take a look at, say, a sales QVW here. So this is one of my applications. And if I hover over this application, I can see some basic metadata about this app. So I can see sort of when it was last modified. I can see some notes about what this app is, what it's used for, who it's used by, where the app lives. So in a very complex environment, or where potentially there's 20 or 50 apps here, there might be 100 apps, there might be 500 apps. These sort of notes and this metadata at the app level becomes very useful. So what I can do here is, just as a quick test, or a typical question might be, what data sources is the sales application using? So if I click on this application, what I can do here is say hide unrelated nodes. So this will hide all the other noise except the things that are related to the sales app. And I can quickly see these are the QVDs that are being used in this application. I can see there's a piece of transformation step on the sales QVD that's being used. And I can also see the raw original data sources that feed through into this application. So the next thing I could do is I can take a deeper dive into this app. I can actually drill down. And so if I look at the content within this app, what I can see here is I have so I've got a sales QVW. I can look at my sheets. I've got a sheet here called main. And then on that sheet, I have an object here. And if I hover over this object, I can see it's a bar chart. And the bar chart is called shipped per country. So if I actually dive into this bar chart, I can see the dimension and the expressions that are in this bar chart. So what I've got here is I've got an expression of account of this ship date, and I have ship country here as the dimension. So if I highlight this expression, for example, I can quickly trace back and see where this expression has come from all the way. So, I mean, what I would typically have to do is if I had a problem with this expression and I wanted to investigate maybe this number seemed inaccurate, for example, I would need to, if I didn't have the knowledge of the lineage of this field, I would have to come and open up the application. I would have to look at the transformation generators. I'd need to look at the extract processes and actually manually follow this field ship date and try and find where my issues were and validate all these steps all the way back to the SQL database that actually gave us this field in the first place. So what I can see with this field here is that it's actually this one field ship date. It actually relates to 3 different date fields here. And so this is starting to get quite typical of a click ETL process. We've got a query down the end here from an SQL database. And from that, we create 2 QVDs. We've got invoices and orders. And then we've got these 3 date fields. We've got an order date, a ship date, and an order ship date. And then these all end up in the sales table in our application, and they end up in the ship date field. So if I really want to interrogate this field, somewhere along the line, I need to really understand what has happened to this field and how did we generate ship date. So what I can do here is I can actually right click on the field here, and I can say explore field. And this will take me to our second module, which is the field explorer. And so what this is showing me is on an individual field level, I can see all of the steps that have occurred that involve this ship date field. So I can actually see right in the first step here, there's an if statement saying, you know, it references the order date, the ship date, and the order ship date. So I can actually trace this, all of the transformation that's happened to create this expression, and I can see all of this at a field level in the Field Explorer. So what I can do here is I can hit reset layout. So what I showed before is this can get very complex. If we have, say, 50 applications that are stacked here, this is going to go quite far down the page. So if I am trying to investigate where this ship date field has come from, I can say hide unrelated nodes, and it will remove all of the noise, and I can easily follow the lineage of the ship date. I can see the app, I can see the transformation stage, and I can actually trace this all the way back to the original data source. So another way of looking at this might be if I have a problem with the ship date, for example, and I know that that ship date field comes, so let me just find the original data source for that ship field again. So the original data source was actually in this orders table in my SQL database, and both of these queries are being used. So a typical question that might come up next is that if there's a problem with this ship date field, what if the problem comes from this data source, what other applications and reports are relying on this extract from this data source? So I can also look at this from the data source end. I can select my data source, I can say hide unrelated nodes, and I can see that I have these 2 transformation processes. I've actually only got one of my applications that are using this. So in terms of troubleshooting, I can start from my individual problem I'm having in a report. I can trace this all the way back to data source, and I can flip the question around and say, well, what else might be affected by this process? Maybe this process failed, a task didn't run, or maybe there's another application that's actually using the ship date field, so I can quickly identify that using this dependency explorer. So we took a quick look at the Field Explorer. So what we can do in the Field Explorer here is we can actually, we can start at the application level here, and we can choose one of our apps, and we can go down and we will, once we've chosen an app, we'll see the tables that exist within that application, and then we'll see the fields that exist within that table. So I can flick through sort of every field that exists within the underlying data model, and I can see any process or any transformation that has happened to that field. So the Field Explorer is it's a very quick way of interrogating the full lineage on a field level without having to open any ClickView or ClickSense applications and try and trace this back manually. So it saves a huge amount of time. So the third module that I wanted to show today, after the Dependency Explorer and the Field Explorer, was the Governance module. So the Governance module has a range of predefined questions set up, and these help us sort of test our Click sort of ETL system. It will help us identify files that are not used, or identify files that have an incoming link and potentially have no outgoing link, things like this. So if I look at one of these questions here, show all QVDs with incoming links that have no outgoing links. So what this is telling me here is that I have a QVD being generated as part of my ETL process, and it's not being used in any reports anywhere. So this is potentially redundant. And as a Click ecosystem starts to scale and gets quite large, you definitely find you end up with a lot of QVDs and a lot of processes that can potentially become redundant, or they are the inverse. They're actually processes and QVDs that are being relied on, but they're not actually being updated or rerun, or the data's not correct. So the Governance module gives you a quick way to actually investigate some of these situations. So we can look at QVDs with no incoming links. Sorry, let's have a look at one with outgoing links and no incoming links. So what this means is this QVD is actually being used in reports, but there's no incoming process that's refreshing this on a regular basis. So this is a good way to see files that potentially need to be updated, or a QVD that's being relied on as a sort of reference table that potentially needs to be refreshed or updated. So another key piece that we can do in NodeGraph is obviously the creation of the auto documentation. So at the application level here, I can right click and I can hit generate documentation. So what NodeGraph will do is it'll automatically create live documentation. These are the different sort of areas in this documentation. So we've got some basic background information on this application, who the owner is, where that application lives, when it was accessed, created, modified, the size. We'll have a list of all of the tables that exist in that app and the unique values in each of the fields in those tables. The next section will give us the actual application content. So this is going to tell us the sheets that exist in the application, and then the actual objects on each of those sheets, and the dimensions and measures and the logic. So this section is going to give us all of the front-end logic and content of the whole application. We then have all of the content of the actual script and the back-end logic. So what we're looking at here is the actual tables and the load script of these tables that are in the underlying data model. And here we can see any logic that's applied. So we're looking at the ship date field again, and we can see this piece of logic that was being used to generate the ship date. At the bottom here, we also get a summary of all of the data sources used that finally make their way through to this app. So I normally find this documentation here, it's amazing because it's up to date, it's 100% correct, and it's always live. You can actually just print this, or you can push this out to a PDF, and it's often really helpful to use this as a starting point, and then you can add some additional comments and sort of domain expertise or domain knowledge to sort of bulk up this documentation. But it's definitely a problem we've seen over and over again, is documentation going stale. So this is a fantastic way of having live documentation to share between the dev team, business users, and also IT. So we looked at the 3 key modules, the Dependency Explorer, the Field Explorer, and the Governance module. There's also 2 additional modules. One is a test module. So the test module, you can set up tests on QBDs or apps to ensure data fits within certain parameters. So this might be, does a certain value exist in a field? Does the aggregation of a field fit within certain boundaries? You can then schedule these tests to run as tasks and monitor these tasks through the NodeGraph interface. And there's also a GDPR module, and this gives a summary of which users have access to which data points within your Qlik ecosystem. So who should use NodeGraph? It's really a tool for developers, business analysts, and also IT. So developers can save a huge amount of time with an instant way to see how a field is being transformed and leveraged throughout the entire Qlik environment. It makes troubleshooting very quick and easy, and it makes change requests quick and a lot less risky. It's really good for business analysts to understand where their data originates from, and it means they can answer questions without having to go back to the dev team and IT. And then on the IT side, NodeGraph is really helpful to understand how the data is traveling through the organization, who has access to it, and where the bottlenecks and risks are. So NodeGraph offers both perpetual and subscription pricing, and those pricing options are tied to the number of user licenses within the Qlik environment. As previously mentioned, the setup and configuration is relatively straightforward. So this is definitely something Pomerol can guide and assist with. So if you're looking to shed some light on your ETL, your Qlik ETL process, or improve confidence in your data output and reporting, then don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We can set up a free trial of the software in your Qlik environment so that you can see it in action. You can register interest if you have interest in some further information at info@pomerolpartners.com. Or if you have any further questions, I know we've raced through this demo. You might have some more specific questions about the sort of pain points that you're trying to answer. Feel free to contact me directly. My email is scott@pomerolpartners.com. So thanks very much for your time and attending the webinar. I hope it was of value, and enjoy the rest of your day.